This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
The Wars of the Roses tore England apart, its bitter feuds ripping through the very fabric of the nation. In the midst of this tumultuous era, young Richard Shelton, known to most as Dick, found himself under the guardianship of Sir Daniel Brackley at Tunstall Moat House. The stone walls of Tunstall loomed before Dick, their imposing presence a constant reminder of his confinement. As his 18th birthday approached, a restlessness stirred within him, like a caged bird yearning for flight. The once comforting fortress now felt more like a prison, its shadows holding secrets that whispered of his father's mysterious death. Sir Daniel Brackley, a man as changeable as the autumn leaves, ruled over Tunstall with an iron fist. His allegiances shifted between York and Lancaster like a weather vane in a storm, always pointing towards power and profit. Dick watched his guardian with growing unease, noting the cruel glint in his eye when dealing with the peasants who toiled on his lands. One crisp morning, the air thick with the scent of burning leaves and distant clanging of armor, Dick stood atop the castle walls. His eyes scanned the fields below, where Bennet Hatch, Sir Daniel's right-hand man, roughly shoved a group of peasants towards their work. The man's face twisted in a sneer, his actions a stark reminder of the brutality that seemed to seep from every stone of Tunstall. "Quite a view, isn't it, young Richard?" A gentle voice broke through Dick's thoughts. He turned to see Sir Oliver Oates, the castle's priest, standing beside him. The old man's kind eyes held a warmth that was rare within these walls. "Aye, Sir Oliver," Dick replied, his voice tinged with sadness, "though I fear the beauty of the land is marred by the cruelty of men." Sir Oliver nodded sagely, his gaze distant. "There are many secrets hidden in these hills, Richard. Some truths are best left buried, while others—" He trailed off, leaving his thought unfinished. Dick's curiosity piqued, like a spark in dry tinder. He had always sensed that Sir Oliver knew more than he let on, especially about Dick's past. But before he could press further, a commotion in the courtyard below caught their attention. Sir Daniel had returned from a hunting expedition, his horse's hooves clattering against the cobblestones like rolling thunder. As Dick watched his guardian dismount, a chill ran down his spine. There was something predatory in Sir Daniel's movements, like a wolf sizing up its next meal. Later that day, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the castle grounds, Dick found himself wandering the dimly lit corridors. The flickering torchlight danced on the stone walls, creating eerie shapes that seemed to whisper secrets. The air grew heavy with unspoken truths, pressing down on Dick's shoulders like an invisible weight. As he passed by Sir Daniel's study, hushed voices caught his ear. Curiosity overcame caution, and Dick pressed himself against the heavy oak door, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. "The boy's inheritance must be secured," Sir Daniel's voice hissed, sharp as a blade. "A marriage will tie him to us completely." "But my lord," Sir Oliver's trembling voice replied, "is it wise to rush such matters? The lad is barely of age." "Silence," Sir Daniel snapped, the word cracking like a whip. "I'll not have my plans questioned. Richard Shelton will marry as I see fit, and his fortune will strengthen our position in this war." Dick stumbled back from the door, his mind reeling. The pieces of a puzzle he didn't know he was solving began to fall into place. Sir Daniel's overly protective nature, the constant supervision, the restricted access to information about his family, it all pointed to a sinister plot. As he retreated to his chambers, Dick's heart raced with a mixture of fear and determination. The seeds of doubt that had been planted in his mind now bloomed into full-fledged suspicion, their roots reaching deep into his soul. In the flickering candlelight of his room, Dick made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth about his past, about his father's death, and about Sir Daniel's true nature. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness and danger, but Dick Shelton was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As he drifted off to sleep, the last thought that crossed his mind was one of resolve. His loyalty to Sir Daniel wavered, like a flame in the wind, setting him on a path that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his life and lineage. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Dick rose early, his mind still churning with the revelations of the previous night. As he dressed, a knock at the door startled him. A servant entered, bearing a message from Sir Daniel. The master requires you to deliver these messages to the villages in Tunstall Forest, the servant said, handing Dick a leather satchel. Dick's heart leapt. This could be his chance to escape the watchful eyes of Tunstall and seek answers. With a mixture of excitement and trepidation, he slung the satchel across his shoulder and made his way to the stables. As he mounted his horse and rode through the gates of Tunstall Moat House, Dick couldn't shake the feeling that this simple errand might be the first step on a dangerous journey. The crisp autumn air nipped at his cheeks, carrying with it the promise of adventure and the whisper of long-buried secrets waiting to be unearthed. The crisp autumn air nipped at Dick Shelton's cheeks. With a satchel of messages for Sir Daniel slung across his shoulder, he set out on his morning errand into the depths of Tunstall Forest. Leaves crunched beneath Dick's boots, a satisfying sound that echoed through the woodland. The forest was a living tapestry, painted in hues of gold and crimson. Shafts of sunlight pierced through the canopy above, creating a dappled pattern on the forest floor. Despite the beauty surrounding him, an uneasy feeling prickled at the back of Dick's neck, like invisible fingers tracing his spine. The air suddenly whistled, sharp and deadly. An arrow embedded itself in a tree trunk mere inches from Dick's face, the sound of impact like a thunderclap in the quiet forest. His heart leaped into his throat, pounding so hard he could feel it in his ears. He spun around, eyes wide, searching frantically for the source of the attack. From the shadows of a gnarled oak, a figure emerged. The man moved with the fluid grace of a predator, his bow held loosely but ready. Dick's mouth went dry, his voice wavering as he called out, "Who goes there?" The mysterious archer stepped forward, sunlight catching the hint of a smile playing on his weathered lips. "I am John Amend All, young master," he replied, his voice low and gravelly, like stones rolling down a hillside, "though some might know me by another name." As the man drew closer, realization struck Dick like a physical blow. He was face to face with Ellis Duckworth, a name whispered in hushed, fearful tones throughout the countryside. Ellis's eyes, sharp as a hawk's and just as piercing, seemed to look right through Dick, reading the very thoughts in his head. "I've a message for you, boy," Ellis continued, his tone growing serious, the smile fading from his face. "A warning, if you will, about the company you keep." Confusion furrowed Dick's brow, his mind racing to understand. "What do you mean?" Ellis's face darkened like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "Sir Daniel, your guardian, is not the man you believe him to be. He has blood on his hands, the blood of innocent men, including your father." The words hit Dick with the force of a battering ram. He stumbled back, shaking his head in disbelief, the world spinning around him. "No," he gasped, "that can't be true. Sir Daniel raised me, he—" "Open your eyes, lad," Ellis interrupted, his voice cutting through Dick's protests like a knife. "The truth is there if you're willing to see it." With a fluid motion that spoke of years of practice, Ellis knocked another arrow to his bow. This one was different, its shaft as black as midnight. It flew past Dick, so close he felt the wind of its passing, and embedded itself in a nearby tree. Carved into its side was a message that made Dick's blood run cold. The black arrow. "Remember this symbol," Ellis said, his voice now barely above a whisper, carried on the autumn breeze. "It marks those who seek justice for the fallen." Before Dick could respond, Ellis melted back into the shadows of the forest, leaving the young man alone with his tumultuous thoughts. The once peaceful woodland now seemed ominous, every rustling leaf and creaking branch a potential threat. With trembling hands, Dick retrieved the black arrow, running his fingers over the carved message. His mind raced with questions and doubts, each thought more unsettling than the last. Could Sir Daniel, the man who had raised him, truly be capable of such heinous acts? The journey back to Tunstall Moat House passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. Dick's feet carried him automatically, while his mind grappled with the earth-shattering revelations. As he approached the imposing structure he had long called home, it suddenly felt alien and foreboding, its stone walls holding secrets he was only beginning to uncover. Inside, Dick found Sir Daniel pacing in the great hall, his footsteps echoing off the high ceiling. Worry etched deep lines in his face, but when he caught sight of Dick, relief washed over his features, quickly replaced by a forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ah, Dick, my boy. You've returned," Sir Daniel exclaimed, his voice unnaturally high. Any, er, trouble on your errand? Dick studied his guardian's face, searching for any sign of the monster Ellis had described. He saw only the familiar features of the man who had raised him, but now there was something else, a flicker of nervousness in his eyes, a tightness around his mouth that spoke of hidden fears. No trouble, sir, Dick replied carefully, watching Sir Daniel's reaction like a hawk. Though I did hear whispers of a black arrow in the forest, the effect was immediate and startling. Sir Daniel's face paled to the color of parchment, and he gripped the back of a nearby chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. A black arrow, you say? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, trembling with an emotion Dick couldn't quite name. In that moment, Dick knew that Ellis's words held at least a grain of truth. The man before him was not the confident, jovial guardian he had always known. This was a man with secrets, a man who feared retribution for past deeds. As Sir Daniel turned away, muttering to himself and calling for his men with a voice edged with panic, Dick made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. He would question the servants, observe Sir Daniel's associates, and piece together the puzzle that had been laid before him. The Tunstall Moat House, once a place of safety and comfort, now felt like a den of lies. As Dick climbed the stairs to his chamber, each step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of his newfound knowledge was a physical burden. He was embarking on a dangerous journey, one that might pit him against the very man who had raised him. But he knew he had no choice. The truth, no matter how painful, was calling to him, and Dick Shelton would answer. As night fell, Dick lay in his bed, unable to sleep. His mind raced with the day's events, replaying every word, every gesture. Outside his window, the wind picked up, carrying with it the promise of change. Tomorrow, he decided, he would begin his investigation in earnest. With determination in his heart and questions burning in his mind, Dick rose from his bed. He had to know more, and he couldn't wait until morning. Silently, he crept from his room, intent on searching Sir Daniel's study for any clues that might shed light on the dark secrets of his past. As he reached for the door handle, a floorboard creaked behind him. Dick froze, his heart pounding. Slowly he turned, dreading what he might find. The autumn air nipped at Dick's cheeks, carrying the earthy scent of damp leaves and distant wood smoke. As he guided his mount through the winding path, the trees loomed overhead, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. Shadows danced at the edge of his vision, and Dick's eyes darted from one to another, his hand never straying far from the hilt of his sword. Suddenly, a small figure stumbled onto the road, startling Dick's horse. The beast reared, and Dick fought to steady it, his heart racing. As the dust settled, his gaze fell upon a young lad, no older than himself, with wide, frightened eyes and clothes that hung loosely on his slight frame. "Please, sir," the boy called out, his voice quavering like a leaf in the wind. "I beg your help." Dick's fingers twitched, ready to draw his weapon, but something in the lad's desperate expression made him pause. "Who are you, boy? And what troubles you so?" "John Matcham, sir," the lad replied, his eyes darting nervously over his shoulder like a hunted rabbit. "I'm fleeing a cruel master. I fear for my life if I'm caught." Dick's heart softened at the boy's plight. The fear in John's eyes stirred something deep within him, a protective instinct he couldn't ignore. Despite his mission, he couldn't bring himself to abandon this frightened soul. "Come," he said, extending his hand. "You may ride with me for a while." As John scrambled onto the horse behind him, Dick felt the boy's trembling body press against his back. They set off together, the forest closing in around them like a green, whispering cocoon, full of secrets and hidden dangers. Their journey through Tunstall Forest was a constant dance with danger. Every snapping twig sent a jolt through Dick's body. Every rustle in the undergrowth made his pulse quicken. He found himself constantly on edge, his senses heightened to every sound and movement, acutely aware of the precious life he now protected. As they traveled, Dick and John shared stories of their lives. John's curiosity about Dick's relationship with Sir Daniel and life at Tunstall Moat House was insatiable, his questions coming in a rapid fire that matched the clip-clop of the horse's hooves. "Sir Daniel took me in after my father's death," Dick explained, his voice low and thoughtful, barely audible above the rustling leaves. But sometimes I wonder if his kindness comes with too high a price. John nodded, his eyes full of understanding beyond his years. Freedom is precious, Dick. Sometimes the gilded cage is still a cage. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth. Dick felt a knot form in his stomach, a seed of doubt taking root. Their days were filled with challenges that tested their mettle. Food was scarce, and the autumn nights grew increasingly cold, seeping into their bones. Dick taught John how to build a fire, his hands moving with practiced ease as he arranged the kindling. Like this, Dick demonstrated, striking the flint. A spark flew, catching the dry tinder. See how the spark catches? That's the key. John proved to be a quick study, his keen mind absorbing every lesson like a sponge. In turn, his sharp eyes and quick wit often helped them avoid danger. Once, as they were about to stumble into a patrol, John spotted a telltale glint of armor through the trees. "Dick, wait!" he hissed, pulling at Dick's sleeve with surprising strength. They ducked behind a fallen log, the rough bark digging into their skin as they held their breath. The patrol passed mere feet away, the clink of their armor sending shivers down Dick's spine. As the days passed, Dick found himself questioning his allegiance to Sir Daniel. The honesty and companionship he found in John was a stark contrast to the political maneuverings and hidden agendas of Tunstall Moat House. It was like comparing the clear, rushing stream of the forest to the stagnant moat that surrounded his home. One particularly cold night, as they huddled together for warmth, John's teeth chattering despite the fire, Dick felt a surge of protectiveness. He wrapped his cloak around them both, pulling the smaller boy close. The warmth of John's body against his chest felt right, like two pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. "We'll make it through this, John," he whispered, his breath misting in the frigid air. "I promise." John looked up at him, trust shining in his eyes like stars. "I believe you, Dick. I'm glad I found you." As Dick drifted off to sleep, the warmth of companionship filling his heart, he couldn't shake the feeling that this journey was changing him. With every shared meal, every danger faced together, every quiet conversation under the star-studded sky, he felt the foundations of his world shifting like sand beneath his feet. In the depths of Tunstall Forest, far from the intrigues of Sir Daniel and the comforts of Moat House, Dick Shelton was discovering a truth about himself. As he held John close, protecting him from the cold night, he realized that in this strange boy, he had found more honesty and companionship than he had ever experienced before. And with that realization came a question that would haunt his dreams. Where did his true loyalty lie? The answer, however, would have to wait. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Dick's eyes snapped open. Something was wrong. The forest, usually alive with the sounds of birds and small animals, was eerily silent. He sat up, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword. "John," he whispered urgently, shaking his companion awake. "We need to move. Now." As they scrambled to their feet, the silence was shattered by a distant shout. Dick's blood ran cold as he recognized the voice. Sir Daniel's men had found them. With no time to lose, Dick grabbed John's hand, and they plunged deeper into the treacherous Tunstall Forest, their hearts pounding with every step, knowing their pursuers were closing in. Dick and John plunged deeper into the treacherous Tunstall Forest. Their hearts pounded with every step, knowing Sir Daniel's men were in hot pursuit. The forest loomed around them, a living, breathing entity of shadows and whispers. Every rustle of leaves sent a jolt of fear through their bodies, like lightning in their veins. Dick's eyes darted from tree to tree, searching for any sign of their pursuers. The smell of damp earth and rotting leaves filled his nostrils, a constant reminder of their desperate flight. John stumbled behind him, breath ragged and face pale with exhaustion. Sweat glistened on his brow, mixing with the grime and scratches from their frantic journey. "We must keep moving," Dick urged, his voice barely above a whisper. He reached back to steady John, who nodded weakly in response. The weight of their situation pressed down on Dick like a physical force, threatening to crush him. They ducked and weaved through the dense underbrush, thorns tearing at their clothes and skin. The forest floor was a treacherous carpet of roots and fallen branches, each step a potential disaster. Suddenly, the sound of a distant horn cut through the air like a knife, sending them scrambling for cover. They pressed themselves against the rough bark of an ancient oak, hearts hammering so loudly Dick feared it might give them away. As they caught their breath, Dick's mind raced with possibilities. How long could they keep this up? Where could they find safety? The responsibility of their survival weighed heavily on his young shoulders. Their moment of respite was short-lived. The unmistakable sound of hoofbeats echoed through the trees, growing louder with each passing second. With a shared look of determination, they set off again, pushing their tired bodies to their limits. They came upon a ravine, its depths shrouded in mist like the mouth of some great beast. Without hesitation, Dick leaped across, his feet finding purchase on the other side. He turned, extending his hand to John, who hesitated at the edge. "You can do it," Dick encouraged, his voice urgent. "We have no choice." John steeled himself and jumped. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed he would make it. But as he landed, his foot slipped on the wet rock. A cry of pain echoed through the forest as John tumbled to the ground, clutching his leg. Dick's heart sank as he rushed to his friend's side. The pursuit momentarily forgotten, he carefully examined John's injury. The leg was badly scraped, blood seeping through the torn fabric like a crimson flower blooming on cloth. "We need to tend to this," Dick muttered, tearing a strip from his own shirt to use as a bandage. As he worked, his fingers brushed against something unexpected beneath John's clothing. Confusion gave way to shock as realization dawned, like a sudden bolt of lightning illuminating the darkness. "John," Dick said, his voice trembling, You're not." The figure before him met his gaze, fear and resignation battling in those familiar eyes. "No, I'm not," came the soft reply. "My name is Joanna Sedley. I am Sir Daniel's ward, and your betrothed." The forest seemed to spin around Dick as he struggled to process this revelation. Joanna was the very person he had been promised to marry, the one he had never met. And now here she was, disguised and on the run. The world he thought he knew crumbled around him like a castle made of sand. "But why?" Dick managed to ask, his mind reeling. Joanna's eyes filled with tears as she explained Sir Daniel's plot to force her into a marriage for his own financial gain. The words tumbled out in a rush, years of fear and resentment finally finding release. Her voice quivered with emotion, each word a testament to the pain she had endured. As Dick listened, his initial shock gave way to a fierce protectiveness. He may not have known Joanna before, but he knew her now. He had seen her courage, her resilience, her kindness. In that moment, he made a silent vow to keep her safe, no matter the cost. "We'll find a way out of this," Dick promised, gently squeezing Joanna's hand. Together, with renewed determination, they set off once more, supporting each other through the unforgiving terrain. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees like grasping fingers, they stumbled upon an abandoned church. Its weathered stone walls promised shelter and a chance to rest, a beacon of hope in their dark journey. Inside, they collapsed onto the cold floor, exhaustion finally catching up with them. As Dick tended to Joanna's wound more thoroughly, a comfortable silence fell between them. The air was thick with unspoken words and newfound understanding. "I'm sorry for deceiving you," Joanna said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice was tinged with regret and fear. Dick shook his head. "You did what you had to do. I understand that now." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted. The bond forged through their shared ordeal deepened, taking on new meaning in light of their true identities. It was as if they were seeing each other for the first time, truly and completely. As night fell, they huddled close for warmth, the moonlight streaming through the broken windows casting an ethereal glow. Dick found himself studying Joanna's face, seeing it truly for the first time. She was no longer just his friend and companion in adversity, but a young woman of remarkable strength and beauty. His heart raced, not from fear this time, but from a new and unfamiliar emotion. Their moment of peace was shattered by the distant sound of horses approaching. Dick and Joanna exchanged a look of alarm, their brief respite coming to an abrupt end. Once again, they were thrust back into the heart-pounding reality of their situation, with danger closing in from all sides. Dick's mind raced, searching for a way out. They couldn't stay in the church. It would be the first place their pursuers would check. But venturing back into the forest at night was equally dangerous. As the sound of hoofbeats grew louder, Dick made a split-second decision. "We have to go," he whispered urgently, helping Joanna to her feet. "Now!" They slipped out of the church and into the darkness of the forest. The night air was cool against their skin, a stark contrast to the warmth they had shared moments ago. Branches whipped at their faces as they ran, the forest seeming to come alive around them. With each step, the sound of pursuit grew closer, driving them deeper into the unknown dangers that lay ahead. Branches whipped at their faces as they ran through the dense forest. The cool air filled their lungs with each labored breath, a stark contrast to the heat of their exertion. The forest was alive with the sounds of their desperate flight, twigs snapping underfoot, leaves rustling, and the distant calls of birds startled by their passage. Suddenly, Dick's foot caught on a hidden root, sending him tumbling to the ground with a muffled cry. The forest floor was a carpet of damp leaves and moss, softening his fall, but leaving him disoriented. Joanna skidded to a halt, her eyes wide with fear as she helped him to his feet. Her touch was gentle but urgent, her fingers trembling slightly as they gripped his arm. "We can't stop," Dick panted, brushing leaves from his clothes. His heart hammered in his chest, each beat a reminder of the danger that pursued them. "Sir Daniel's men could be right behind us." As if in answer to his words, a twig snapped nearby. The sound was like a thunderclap in the tense silence. Dick and Joanna froze, their bodies tense as statues, barely daring to breathe. The forest seemed to hold its breath with them, the usual chorus of bird song and rustling leaves falling eerily silent. But instead of Sir Daniel's men, a figure emerged from behind a massive oak tree. Ellis Duckworth, the mysterious archer Dick had encountered earlier. His sudden appearance was both a relief and a new source of uncertainty. "Follow me," Ellis whispered, his eyes darting around the forest. "Quickly now." His voice was low and urgent, carrying the weight of unspoken danger. With no other choice, Dick and Joanna trailed after Ellis, who led them through a maze of trees and undergrowth. The forest seemed to shift and change around them, a living, breathing entity that both concealed and revealed. Shadows danced at the edge of their vision, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. Suddenly they found themselves in a hidden clearing, the transition so abrupt it was as if they had stepped through an invisible doorway. The sight that greeted them was astonishing, a stark contrast to the wild forest they had just navigated. Nestled among the trees was a bustling camp, filled with rough-looking men and women going about their daily tasks. Tents of various sizes dotted the area, their canvas walls rippling in the gentle breeze. The smell of cooking meat wafted through the air, rich and inviting, making Dick's stomach growl despite the tension of the moment. "Welcome," Ellis said with a hint of pride in his voice, "to the home of the forest outlaws." Dick's mind raced as he took in the scene before him. Here, hidden away from the world, was a chance to learn more about his father's murder and keep Joanna safe. The camp buzzed with activity, men sharpening weapons, women mending clothes, children darting between tents on some mysterious errand. It was a world unto itself, governed by its own rules and rhythms. With a deep breath, he made his decision. The air felt charged with possibility, as if he stood on the precipice of a new life. "I want to join you," Dick declared, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. Ellis raised an eyebrow, studying the young man before him. His gaze was piercing, as if he could see right through to Dick's very soul. "It won't be easy," he warned, his voice gruff but not unkind. "But I sense potential in you, lad." "Very well. We'll give you a chance to prove yourself." And so began Dick's transformation from a naive ward to a skilled outlaw. Days blurred into weeks, each one bringing new challenges and triumphs. His hands grew calloused from hours of archery practice, the bow becoming an extension of his arm. His muscles ached from sword drills, but with each passing day, the blade felt more natural in his grip. His mind sharpened as he learned the ways of the forest, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. Will Lawless, a boisterous man with a laugh like rolling thunder, took Dick under his wing. His presence was larger than life, filling the forest with his infectious energy. "You're one of us now, lad," he'd say, clapping Dick on the back after a particularly grueling training session. The impact would nearly knock Dick off his feet, but the warmth in Will's voice made him stand taller. "We look after our own." Greenchev, a man of few words but great wisdom, often sat with Dick by the campfire in the evenings. The crackling flames cast dancing shadows across his weathered face as he shared quiet insights. His presence was a balm to Dick's troubled thoughts, and his occasional nuggets of advice helped guide the young man through his doubts and fears. As Dick's skills grew, so did his understanding of the world around him. The outlaws weren't mere thieves, but men and women fighting against the corruption that plagued the land. They had a code of honor, protecting the innocent and bringing justice to those who abused their power. Each raid they conducted was carefully planned, targeting only those who truly deserved it. Joanna, too, found her place among the outlaws. Hidden away for her own protection, she learned to survive in the forest, her delicate hands growing strong and sure as she mastered new skills. The men and women of the camp came to respect her determination and quick wit. Dick often caught himself watching her, marveling at how she had blossomed in this unlikely environment. With each passing day, Dick felt himself changing. The naive boy who had stumbled into the forest was fading away, replaced by a capable young man with a keen eye and a steady hand. He participated in daring raids against Sir Daniel's allies, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration as they struck out against injustice. The common folk began to whisper of the young archer, a mysterious figure who seemed to appear out of nowhere to right wrongs and vanish just as quickly. Dick found himself both thrilled and unnerved by his growing reputation. It was a mask he wore, a symbol of hope for the oppressed, but it also felt like a weight on his shoulders. But even as he reveled in his new life, a shadow loomed over Dick's thoughts. He knew that this idyllic existence in the forest couldn't last forever. Sir Daniel was still out there, a constant threat lurking at the edges of his newfound peace. The truth about his father's murder remained hidden, a puzzle with missing pieces that haunted his dreams. As the sun set on another day in the forest, Dick stood at the edge of the camp, his eyes fixed on the darkening trees. The weight of his bow on his back was a comfort, but it couldn't ease the growing tension in his heart. The forest whispered its secrets, the rustling leaves carrying hints of dangers yet to come. He knew that eventually he would have to leave the safety of the forest and confront Sir Daniel, facing whatever dangers lay ahead to uncover the truth about his past. The thought sent a shiver down his spine, a mix of fear and anticipation. As Dick turned to head back to camp, a hand grasped his shoulder. He spun around, heart racing, to find Ellis standing there, his face grave in the fading light. "It's time, lad," Ellis said, his voice low and urgent. "We've received word. Sir Daniel is on the move, and he's coming for us all." Dick's breath caught in his throat. The moment he had both dreaded and longed for had finally arrived. As the shadows lengthened around them, he realized that his time in the forest had been merely the calm before the storm. The real test was yet to come, and it was rushing towards them with the speed of an arrow in flight. Dick's integration into the outlaw band deepened with each passing day. As time went on, he grew closer to his newfound companions, forming bonds that would shape his future. The forest nights grew long and cold, a chill seeping into the very marrow of their bones. Yet around the crackling campfire, a different kind of warmth blossomed. Flames danced in the eyes of weathered men, casting long shadows that seemed to hold secrets of their own. It was in these intimate moments that Ellis Duckworth, his face etched with the lines of a hard life, chose to speak. "Listen well, young Shelton," Ellis began, his voice as rough as tree bark. "What I'm about to tell you will shake the very ground beneath your feet." Dick leaned in, the firelight flickering across his eager face. As Ellis began his tale, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The story of Sir Harry Shelton's murder unfolded like a tapestry of betrayal, each thread revealing the true nature of Sir Daniel. With every word, the guardian Dick had known crumbled away, replaced by a man consumed by greed and ambition. "Your father wasn't the only victim," Ellis continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that barely carried over the crackling fire. "Sir Daniel's hands are stained with the blood of many." The words hit Dick like a physical blow. His mind reeled, struggling to reconcile the man who had raised him with this monster Ellis described. As stolen documents were produced and survivor testimonies recounted, each piece of evidence felt like a dagger to Dick's heart. But why? Dick's voice cracked, betraying the turmoil within. Why would he do this? Ellis's eyes hardened, reflecting the dancing flames. Land, wealth, power, the eternal temptations of weak men. As the truth sank in, Dick felt as if he were drowning in a sea of doubt. Everything he thought he knew about his life, his guardian, his place in the world, it all crumbled like a sandcastle before the relentless tide of reality. And you, Ellis? Dick asked, searching the older man's face for any hint of deception. Where do you fit in all this? A flicker of old pain crossed Ellis's weathered features. I was your father's friend, lad, his loyal companion. I swore to protect you, and that oath led me to become the Black Arrow. The revelation hit Dick like a thunderbolt. The mysterious figure that had haunted his thoughts was sitting right before him, a living, breathing connection to his father. The weight of this knowledge settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. As days turned to weeks, Dick's resolve hardened like steel in a forge. The more he learned of Sir Daniel's crimes, the stronger his determination to seek justice grew. He pored over maps of Tunstall Moat House, his fingers tracing potential entry points, his mind calculating risks and strategies with a focus that surprised even himself. The outlaws became his teachers, honing his skills with bow and blade. Dick threw himself into training with a fervor that left his body aching but his spirit soaring. Each improvement, no matter how small, felt like a step closer to his goal. One misty morning, Dick found himself standing before an unmarked mound of earth, his father's grave. The weight of his family's legacy pressed down upon him, threatening to crush his spirit. Yet as he placed his hand on the cool, damp soil, a spark of determination ignited within him. I will make this right, Father, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. I swear it. As dawn broke on the day of their planned attack, a nervous energy thrummed through the camp. The air felt charged, as if the very forest held its breath in anticipation. Dick stood before the assembled outlaws, his heart pounding but his voice steady. Men, he began, his gaze sweeping over the rugged faces before him. Today we fight not just for vengeance, but for justice. For every life Sir Daniel has destroyed, for every family torn apart by his greed. We are the arrow that will pierce the heart of his tyranny. A cheer rose from the gathered outlaws, a sound of hope and determination that echoed through the forest. As they prepared for battle, Dick felt a strange calm settle over him. Whatever the outcome, he knew that this day would change everything. Just as they were about to move out, a breathless scout burst into the clearing. His face was pale, his eyes wide with urgency. They've taken her, he gasped. Sir Daniel's men. They've captured Joanna. The news hit the camp like a thunderbolt. Faces that moments ago had been filled with determination now showed shock and confusion. Dick felt his blood run cold, his carefully laid plans crumbling around him. Dick stepped forward, his voice unwavering as he volunteered to lead a rescue mission. The other outlaws exchanged worried glances, fully aware of the extreme danger such an endeavor would entail. Dick stepped forward, his voice unwavering as he volunteered to lead a rescue mission. The other outlaws exchanged worried glances, fully aware of the extreme danger such an endeavor would entail. But Dick's determination burned brighter than the campfire before them, his love for Joanna a flame that refused to be extinguished. The forest grew hushed as twilight descended, the trees casting long, eerie shadows across the leaf-strewn ground. Dick's fingers trembled slightly as he donned the rough-spun robes of a monk, the coarse fabric scratching against his skin like a constant reminder of the perilous deception he was about to undertake. He took a deep breath, inhaling the earthy scent of moss and damp wood, steeling himself for what lay ahead. With each step towards Shoreby Castle, Dick's heart pounded louder, a war drum echoing in his chest. The looming silhouette of the fortress cut a jagged line against the star-studded sky, its stone walls seeming to whisper threats on the cool night breeze. Sweat beaded on Dick's brow as he approached the gates, but he forced his features into a mask of calm indifference. Drawing on the skills honed among the outlaws, Dick hunched his shoulders and lowered his gaze. blending seamlessly with the servants scurrying about the torchlit courtyard. The acrid smell of smoke mingled with the stench of unwashed bodies and animal dung, assaulting his senses as he navigated the treacherous corridors of Shoreby Castle. Every sound set Dick's nerves on edge: the metallic clank of armor, the whisper of hushed conversations, the scurry of rats in the walls. Any noise could spell his doom. Suddenly he froze, pressing himself against a cold stone wall, his breath catching in his throat as familiar voices drifted from a nearby chamber. "The girl will be married off to Lord Foxham within the fortnight," Sir Daniel's gruff voice declared, dripping with smug satisfaction. "Her fortune will be ours, and that meddlesome Dick Shelton will be powerless to stop us." Dick's blood boiled at the words, his fists clenching involuntarily. But he forced himself to remain still, knowing that one wrong move could shatter his fragile disguise. As if guided by some unseen hand, Dick found himself drawn to a tower at the far end of the castle. His heart leaped into his throat as he pushed open a heavy oak door, revealing Joanna. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then filled with tears of joy as he revealed himself. "Dick," she whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. "I knew you'd come." Their reunion was cut brutally short by the sound of approaching footsteps, heavy and ominous against the stone floor. In a flurry of action, Dick grasped Joanna's hand and they fled the tower, their hearts racing in tandem as they dodged patrols and ducked through hidden passageways. The castle became a nightmarish maze, each turn potentially leading them into the arms of their enemies. As they emerged onto the rooftops of Shoreby, the wind whipped at their clothes, threatening to tear them from the precarious perch. Dick's grip on Joanna's hand tightened as they leaped from building to building, the ground a dizzying blur far below. Each jump was a leap of faith, their trust in each other the only thing keeping them from plummeting to certain death. Finally, they plunged into the welcoming darkness of the forest, the branches whipping at their faces as they ran. They didn't stop until their lungs burned and their legs trembled, finally collapsing in a hidden glade bathed in soft, ethereal moonlight. As they caught their breath, Dick and Joanna's eyes met. In that moment, something shifted between them, as palpable as the night air on their skin. The danger they had faced together had forged a bond stronger than steel, their shared peril bringing them closer than ever before. "Joanna," Dick said softly, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her cheek. "I swear I will protect you with my life. We'll find a way through this. Together." Joanna's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she took his hand in hers, her touch sending a jolt of electricity through his body. "And I'll stand by your side, Dick. Whatever comes, we'll face it as one." Their moment of peace was shattered by the distant baying of hounds, a chilling reminder of the danger that still lurked in the shadows. They knew they needed to find a more secure haven, and quickly. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky in hues of pink and gold, Dick and Joanna made their plans. Dick would seek out his newfound allies, gathering support for their cause, while Joanna would go into hiding with trusted friends. Before they parted, Dick pulled Joanna close, drinking in the warmth of her body against his. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, a promise of the future they would fight for. As they reluctantly separated, both knew that their happiness, indeed their very lives, depended on the success of their dangerous mission. With one last lingering look, Dick set off into the forest, his heart heavy but his resolve strong. Joanna watched him go, then turned to make her own way to safety. Though apart, their hearts beat as one, united in their love and their determination to overcome the challenges that lay ahead. As Dick pushed deeper into the forest, his mind raced with possibilities. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, threatening to crush his spirit. But then, a wild idea took root in his mind, growing stronger with each step. His pace quickened as a bold plan began to form, one that could change everything. Dick's heart swelled with a mixture of fear and excitement as he realized what he must do next. Dick's heart swelled with determination as he made a bold decision. He would join the army of Richard, Duke of Gloucester, to prove his worth to Joanna and gain the power needed to protect her. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the courtyard as Dick prepared to bid farewell to his beloved. Joanna's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her hand trembling slightly as she reached out to touch his cheek. "Promise me you'll return," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. Dick clasped her hand in his, feeling the warmth of her skin against his calloused palm. "I swear it," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll come back for you, stronger and more capable of keeping you safe." With a heavy heart, he turned away, the weight of separation settling on his shoulders like a lead cloak. The clang of steel on steel filled the air as Dick plunged into the grueling world of military training. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes as he drew his bow again and again. His muscles screamed in protest, but with each arrow that found its mark, a fierce pride bloomed in his chest. The skills honed in the Greenwood set him apart, earning nods of approval from even the most hardened veterans. Days blurred into weeks, and Dick found his mind sharpening alongside his body. Battle strategies and tactics consumed his thoughts, filling the void left by Joanna's absence. In the chaos of skirmishes, where others faltered, Dick's quick thinking shone like a beacon. He moved with the grace of a deer, struck with the precision of a hawk, and soon whispers of admiration followed in his wake. It was during one particularly fierce engagement that Dick's mettle was truly tested. The acrid smell of smoke filled his nostrils, mingling with the metallic tang of blood. Through the haze, he spotted a fellow soldier cornered by 3 enemy fighters. Without hesitation, Dick knocked an arrow and let it fly. The shaft whistled through the air, finding its mark with deadly accuracy. In a blur of motion, he drew his sword in charge, the blade flashing in the sun as he dispatched the remaining foes. The rescued soldier, eyes wide with gratitude, clasped Dick's arm. "I owe you my life," he breathed, his voice barely audible above the din of battle. Little did Dick know that this act of bravery had caught the eye of none other than the Duke of Gloucester himself. As the dust settled and the army regrouped, Dick found himself summoned to the Duke's tent. The air inside was heavy with the scent of leather and polished steel. Richard, Duke of Gloucester, cut an imposing figure, his sharp eyes seeming to pierce through Dick's very soul. "Your actions on the field have not gone unnoticed, young Shelton," the Duke's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "I see in you a spark of greatness. From this day forth, you shall serve as my personal squire." Dick's world tilted on its axis. In the blink of an eye, he had been elevated from a common soldier to a position of trust and influence. As he knelt to swear his loyalty, his mind raced with the possibilities this new role might bring. The following months were a whirlwind of activity. Dick found himself thrust into the heart of the Wars of the Roses, a conflict as thorny and complex as its namesake. He watched, wide-eyed, as alliances shifted like sand dunes in the wind. The brutality of war, once an abstract concept, now played out before him in vivid, often horrifying detail. Yet it was the Duke himself who proved to be Dick's greatest teacher. Richard of Gloucester moved through the world of politics like a master chess player, always 3 moves ahead. Dick observed, learned, and slowly began to understand the intricate dance of power that shaped the fate of nations. As Dick's understanding grew, so too did his inner conflict. The black and white world of his youth began to blur into shades of gray. Nobility, he realized, was not always synonymous with goodness, nor was power always wielded for the benefit of the many. Fate, it seemed, had one more test in store for young Dick Shelton. In a pivotal battle against Lancastrian forces, the tide of war threatened to turn against them. The air was thick with arrows, the ground slick with blood. Through the chaos, Dick spotted a nobleman, Lord Foxham, surrounded by enemy soldiers. Without a second thought, Dick spurred his horse forward. His sword flashed like lightning, cutting a path through the melee. With a mighty cry, he reached Lord Foxham's side, his blade a whirlwind of steel that drove back the attackers. As the last enemy fell, Lord Foxham turned to Dick with eyes shining in admiration. "My boy," he said, his voice filled with wonder, "you have saved not just my life, but the fortunes of this battle." The Duke of Gloucester, witnessing Dick's heroic actions, strode forward. In a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, he drew his sword and laid it upon Dick's shoulder. "Rise, Sir Richard Shelton," the Duke's voice rang out across the battlefield. "Your bravery and loyalty have earned you a place among the knights of the realm." As Dick rose, now Sir Richard, he felt the weight of his new title settle upon him like a mantle. With knighthood came new responsibilities, new dangers, and new opportunities. His mind turned to Joanna, to Sir Daniel, to the justice he still sought. In the days that followed, Sir Richard began to navigate the treacherous waters of his new position. He gathered information, whispered conversations in shadowy corners, yielding secrets about Sir Daniel's activities. He cultivated allies, each new connection a potential key to unlocking his ultimate goal. Yet as Sir Richard's influence grew, so too did the conflict within his heart. He found himself torn between his duty to the Duke, a man he had come to respect and admire, and his personal quest for justice and love. The path ahead was shrouded in mist, fraught with danger and uncertainty. As night fell on the encampment, Sir Richard stood alone gazing at the stars, the same stars he knew that shone down upon Joanna, wherever she might be. With a deep breath, he steeled himself for the challenges that lay ahead. For in his heart, he knew that his journey was far from over. Just as he was about to retire for the night, a messenger burst into his tent, breathless and wide-eyed. "Sir Richard," the man gasped, "urgent news from your homeland." Sir Richard's heart leapt into his throat, a cold dread seeping into his bones. What could have happened? Was Joanna safe? As he reached for the sealed message, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change once again. Sir Richard's heart pounded as the alarming news reached his ears. Sir Daniel was plotting to force Joanna into marriage with the wealthy Lord Shoreby, a union that would seal her fate forever. The stone walls of his chambers seemed to close in around him as he paced, the flickering candlelight casting long, dancing shadows. Each step echoed his racing thoughts, a plan forming in his mind like a delicate tapestry being woven thread by thread. Drawing a deep breath, Sir Richard steeled himself for the task ahead. The scent of burning wax and old parchment filled his nostrils as he sat at his desk, quill in hand. With newfound status and connections forged in the Duke's service, he began to pull the strings of Shoreby society. Whispers became his weapons, carefully placed words his arrows. The scratch of quill on parchment filled the air as he penned cryptic messages, each one a calculated move in his grand design. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Sir Richard's plan was set in motion. Under the cover of darkness, he sought out his most trusted companions. The cool night air carried the scent of damp earth and distant smoke as they gathered in a secluded clearing. Eyes gleamed with excitement in the moonlight as Sir Richard shared his daring plan, their loyalty as unshakable as ancient oaks. The day of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Sir Richard's heart. The air hummed with tension as he and his team took their positions around the church. The imposing stone structure loomed before them, its walls seeming to pulse with the weight of the moment. As the wedding ceremony began, the church bells tolled ominously, each peal sending a shiver down Sir Richard's spine. His pulse quickened, hand instinctively tightening on the hilt of his sword. The moment had come. With a dramatic flourish, Sir Richard burst through the heavy wooden doors, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "I challenge Lord Shoreby's right to this marriage." The assembled nobles gasped, a sea of shocked faces turning towards him. In that moment of stunned silence, Sir Richard unleashed his accusations against Sir Daniel. His words cut through the air like a blade, sharp and precise. The crowd stirred, murmurs of disbelief and outrage rippling through the gathering like waves on a stormy sea. Chaos erupted as Sir Richard's disguised companions sprang into action. The church became a whirlwind of motion and sound, the rustle of fine fabrics and the clang of metal filling the air. Sir Richard fought his way through the crowd, his eyes locked on Joanna. Their gazes met across the tumult, a spark of hope igniting in Joanna's eyes. But their moment of triumph was short-lived. Sir Daniel's men closed in, their weapons glinting menacingly in the light streaming through the stained glass windows. Backed against the altar, Sir Richard raised his sword, its polished surface reflecting the determination in his eyes. Across from him, Sir Daniel's face twisted with rage, his guards forming a menacing semicircle. The air grew thick with the scent of fear and sweat, the taste of desperation bitter on their tongues. Joanna, her wedding gown billowing around her like a storm cloud, seized her moment. Her voice rang out, clear and defiant, as she denounced the forced marriage. Her words seemed to hang in the air, adding fuel to the already explosive situation. The once peaceful church now became a battleground. Swords clashed with a metallic ring, the sound echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Alliances shifted like sand in the wind as more of Sir Richard's allies revealed themselves. Sir Richard and Joanna found themselves pushed back, the press of bodies and blades forcing them into a corner. The cold stone wall at their backs, they exchanged a look of shared determination. In that moment, with danger pressing in from all sides, they knew they had no choice but to risk everything. As they prepared for one last, desperate gambit, the air in the church suddenly grew still. A hush fell over the crowd, as if the very breath had been sucked from the room. In that eerie silence, a faint whistle pierced the air, growing louder with each passing heartbeat. The tension at the interrupted wedding reached its breaking point. Suddenly, a black arrow whistled through the air, finding its mark with deadly precision. Lord Shoreby's eyes widened in shock as the arrow pierced his heart, his body crumpling to the ground like a marionette with cut strings. The church, once filled with hushed anticipation, erupted into chaos. Screams tore through the air, mingling with the frantic rustling of fine silks and the clatter of overturned benches. In the pandemonium, Ellis Duckworth, the skilled archer responsible for Lord Shoreby's demise, vanished like morning mist. His presence, felt only in the aftermath of his deadly shot, left a chill in the air that had nothing to do with the drafty stone walls. Sir Daniel, his eyes glinting with the cold calculation of a predator, seized upon the moment of confusion. His voice cut through the din like a knife, sharp and accusing. "Murderer!" he bellowed, his finger stabbing the air towards Sir Richard. "Seize him!" The words fell like a hammer blow, stunning Sir Richard into momentary silence. His face, already pale from the shock of the assassination, now drained of what little color remained. "I swear on my honor, I had no part in this," he protested, his voice rising above the cacophony of panicked voices and shuffling feet. But his words were lost in the sea of fear and suspicion that swept through the crowd. The wedding guests, their faces contorted with a mixture of horror and anger, pressed in around him. The air grew thick with the scent of fear and the metallic tang of spilled wine, making it hard to breathe. Sir Daniel's guards advanced, their armor clanking ominously in the vaulted space of the church. The flickering candlelight glinted off their drawn swords, transforming them into agents of retribution rather than protectors of the peace. Realizing the futility of words in the face of such blind accusation, Sir Richard's hand flew to his sword. The ring of steel filled the air as he drew his blade, the sound cutting through the chaos like a clarion call. Desperation lent strength to his arm as he fought like a cornered lion, his sword a blur of silver against the encroaching darkness of his enemies. The church, once a sanctuary of peace and reverence, now echoed with the harsh song of battle. The clash of steel on steel reverberated off the stone walls, punctuated by grunts of exertion and cries of pain. The scent of blood and sweat mingled with the lingering incense, creating a surreal atmosphere of violence in a place of worship. Just as it seemed Sir Richard would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers, a new commotion erupted at the church doors. Will Lawless and his band of outlaws burst in, their arrival as unexpected and violent as a summer storm. "To me, Richard!" Will's voice boomed across the chaos, a lifeline in a sea of hostility. Sir Richard fought his way through the melee towards Joanna, his heart pounding with equal parts fear and determination. Their eyes met across the churning sea of bodies, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Without a word, he grasped her hand, and together they raced for the exit, ducking and weaving through the crowd like leaves caught in a whirlwind. The cool night air hit them like a slap as they burst out of the church, the sudden silence after the chaos inside momentarily disorienting. The streets of Shoreby stretched before them, a maze of shadows and flickering torchlight. They ran as if the hounds of hell were at their heels, their breath coming in ragged gasps that burned in their lungs. Behind them, the shouts of pursuit grew louder, spurring them on. They darted through narrow alleys and across moonlit squares, the cobblestones slick with evening dew beneath their feet. More than once, they narrowly avoided capture, ducking into shadowy doorways or behind market stalls as Sir Daniel's men thundered past, their armor clanking like the chains of doom. As they finally reached the edge of the forest, its dark embrace offering a promise of safety, they paused to catch their breath. The news that reached their ears was as chilling as the night air that nipped at their skin. Sir Daniel, wielding his influence like a weapon, had turned public opinion against Sir Richard. The whispers carried on the wind spoke of wanted posters bearing Sir Richard's likeness, of a substantial reward for his capture. "We cannot stay here," Joanna whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. Her eyes, wide with fear, yet burning with determination, met Sir Richard's gaze. He nodded, his jaw set with grim resolve. They plunged into the forest, relying on the kindness of sympathetic peasants and Sir Richard's network of allies to stay one step ahead of their pursuers. The forest closed around them like a protective cloak, its shadows both comforting and menacing. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves set their hearts racing, the constant threat of discovery wearing on their nerves like a grinding stone. As they moved from one hiding place to another, always alert, always watching, they caught snatches of conversation about the Black Arrow. The deadly accuracy of Ellis Duckworth's shot had become the stuff of legend overnight, complicating their already precarious situation. The arrow that had ended Lord Shoreby's life now seemed to hang over their heads, a symbol of the danger that stalked their every move. The gravity of their predicament weighed heavily on Sir Richard. It wasn't just his future with Joanna at stake, but the chance to bring Sir Daniel to justice for his many crimes. As they huddled in a hidden cave, the damp stone walls closing in around them like the jaws of fate, Sir Richard's mind raced. He knew that clearing his name was no longer just a matter of honor. It was a matter of survival. Joanna's hand found his in the darkness, her touch a beacon of hope in their dire circumstances. "We'll find a way," she murmured, her voice steady despite the fear that must have gripped her heart. In the flickering light of their small fire, shadows danced on the cave walls, mirroring the turmoil of their thoughts. Sir Richard squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her unwavering faith. As they spoke in hushed tones, mapping out their strategy to prove Sir Richard's innocence and expose Sir Daniel's treachery, they knew that their very lives hung in the balance. The cave around them seemed to hold its breath, as if the very stones were aware of the magnitude of their undertaking. As the first light of dawn began to seep into their hiding place, Sir Richard's resolve hardened. A hefty price hung over his head, casting a long shadow over his every move. Time was slipping through his fingers like sand, urging him towards a desperate quest to prove his innocence. With Joanna by his side, he stepped out of the cave and into the uncertain light of a new day, knowing that every moment brought them closer to either salvation or doom. A hefty price hung over Sir Richard's head, casting a long shadow over his every move. Time was slipping through his fingers like sand, urging him towards a desperate quest to prove his innocence. The misty dawn painted the world in shades of gray as Sir Richard bid a heavy-hearted farewell to Joanna. Her tearful eyes, glistening like dew on morning grass, haunted him as he set off. The weight of his mission pressed upon his shoulders, each step carrying him further from those he loved and closer to the dangerous task at hand. Days blurred into a whirlwind of hushed conversations and clandestine meetings. Sir Richard's heart raced with every encounter, the constant fear of discovery a cold companion. In dimly lit taverns that reeked of ale and desperation, he forged new alliances. None proved more crucial than that with Master Brackley, a sympathetic magistrate whose piercing gaze seemed to cut through to Sir Richard's very soul. "I'll hear your case," Master Brackley had whispered, his words a lifeline in Sir Richard's sea of uncertainty. The hunt for evidence consumed Sir Richard like a fever. He scoured the countryside, his keen eyes searching for any scrap that might prove his innocence. A tavern keeper's testimony became a beacon of hope, the man's weathered face lighting up with recognition as he recalled Sir Richard's presence miles from Lord Shoreby's murder. The memory of that moment sent a surge of hope through Sir Richard's veins, propelling him forward. As autumn leaves began to fall, painting the world in hues of gold and crimson, Sir Richard uncovered a trove of damning documents. His fingers trembled as he traced the lines linking Sir Daniel to a web of crimes. Land theft, extortion, and worse. Each revelation was both a victory and a burden, for it brought him closer to the truth but deeper into danger. The rustle of parchment seemed deafening in the quiet of his hideout, each new discovery sending his heart racing. The imposing walls of Shoreby Castle loomed before him, a fortress of secrets Sir Richard was determined to breach. Under the cover of a moonless night, he scaled the ancient stones, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm in his chest. The cool, rough surface beneath his fingers grounded him as he climbed, focusing his mind on the task at hand. Inside, the castle corridors were a maze of shadows and whispers. Every creak of a floorboard sent a jolt of fear through his body, his muscles tensing with each sound. Sir Daniel's private chambers held the key, a crucial piece of evidence that could tip the scales of justice. The musty smell of old parchment filled his nostrils as he rifled through documents, his eyes darting between the papers and the door. The sound of approaching footsteps sent ice through his veins. He slipped into the shadows, barely daring to breathe as guards passed mere inches from his hiding place. The stolen evidence felt like fire against his skin as he made his daring escape, melting into the night like a ghost. The cool night air, a welcome relief on his flushed face. Sir Richard's skills as an outlaw served him well in these desperate times. He moved like a shadow through the countryside, always one step ahead of those who sought to bring him to what they called justice. Close calls became a daily occurrence, a narrow escape from a patrol here, a last-second dodge from recognition there. Each brush with capture left him breathless but more determined than ever, his resolve hardening with each near miss. The search for Ellis Duckworth proved to be a challenge that tested Sir Richard's resolve to its limits. When at last he found the man, convincing him to come forward was like coaxing a frightened animal from its den. Ellis's eyes were wild with fear, darting about like those of a cornered beast, but Sir Richard's impassioned pleas slowly broke through his defenses, his words a soothing balm to Ellis's frayed nerves. "I cannot let an innocent man hang for my deed," Ellis finally whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The day of reckoning arrived like a storm breaking over the land. The courtroom buzzed with tension, a hive of whispers and sidelong glances. Sir Richard stood tall, his heart thundering in his chest as he faced off against Sir Daniel's venomous accusations. The air crackled with the electricity of conflict as witnesses were called and documents presented. Arguments flew back and forth like arrows in battle, each side fighting for their version of the truth. Sir Richard's voice rang out clear and strong, fueled by the fire of righteousness. Sir Daniel's face twisted with rage and fear as his carefully constructed lies began to unravel, his composure cracking like ice in the spring thaw. Just when it seemed the tide might turn against him, fate dealt Sir Richard an unexpected hand. An old servant of Sir Daniel's, his face lined with years of silent guilt, stepped forward. The courtroom fell into a hush as the man's trembling voice recounted years of witnessed atrocities. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional gasp of shock from the audience. As the final piece of the puzzle fell into place, a wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Sir Richard watched as the truth dawned on faces around him, disbelief giving way to understanding and then to outrage. The weight that had pressed upon him for so long began to lift, replaced by a surge of vindication that coursed through his body like lightning. In that moment, as public opinion shifted like the changing wind, Sir Richard felt the sweet rush of freedom. The charges against him crumbled, swept away by the tide of truth. He stood, no longer a hunted man, but one reborn in the eyes of justice. As the courtroom erupted in a cacophony of voices, Sir Richard's mind raced ahead. His name was cleared, his honor restored, but the battle was far from over. Sir Daniel still stood before him, a formidable foe even in defeat. As their eyes locked across the crowded room, Sir Richard felt a surge of determination. The final confrontation loomed on the horizon, and he knew that the true test of his mettle was yet to come. Sir Richard's name had been cleared, his honor restored at last. With newfound determination coursing through his veins, he steeled himself for the final, climactic battle against Sir Daniel. The great hall of Tunstall Moat House loomed before Sir Richard, its ancient stone walls seeming to whisper secrets of countless intrigues and betrayals. Flickering torchlight cast eerie, dancing shadows across the room, creating an atmosphere thick with tension and unspoken threats. The air felt heavy, laden with the weight of impending confrontation. Sir Richard's footsteps echoed ominously as he strode into the hall, each step purposeful and resolute. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, ready to draw at a moment's notice. At the far end of the room stood Sir Daniel, his face a complex mask of defiance and barely concealed fear. "I demand the truth about my father's death." Sir Richard's voice rang out, steady and unwavering. The words seemed to hang in the air, challenging the very foundations of Sir Daniel's power. Sir Daniel's eyes darted about, reminiscent of a cornered animal searching desperately for escape. Now, my boy," he said, his tone sickly sweet, a stark contrast to the venom in his eyes. "Let's not be hasty. I can offer you wealth beyond your wildest dreams, power that would make kings envious." But Sir Richard stood firm, his jaw set and eyes blazing with righteous fury. The years of uncertainty and pain had forged his resolve into something unbreakable. "Your bribes mean nothing to me," he spat, disgust evident in every syllable. "I want answers, and I want them now." The tension in the room crackled like lightning before a storm, electric and dangerous. Sir Daniel's facade crumbled under the weight of Sir Richard's unwavering gaze. In a moment of desperation, the truth burst forth like water from a broken dam. "Yes," Sir Daniel cried, his voice a mixture of defiance and defeat. "I orchestrated the murder of Sir Harry Shelton and others. What of it? It was for the greater good." No sooner had the words left his lips than the clash of steel rang out, echoing through the castle like the tolling of a funeral bell. Sir Richard, fueled by years of pent-up anger and honed by hard-won experience, matched Sir Daniel blow for blow. Their swords sang a deadly song, a duet of vengeance and desperation. From the great hall to the winding staircases, across moonlit ramparts and through shadowy corridors, the battle raged. Sir Richard pressed his advantage, his blade a blur of righteous fury. Sir Daniel, once so confident in his power, now fought with the desperation of a man who sees his doom approaching. Just as Sir Richard gained the upper hand, fate intervened in the form of Ellis Duckworth. Silent as a ghost, he appeared on the battlements, his bow drawn and arrow nocked. Time seemed to slow, the world holding its breath as the arrow flew, finding its mark with unerring accuracy. Sir Daniel stumbled, his eyes wide with shock and pain. Blood bubbled at his lips as he gasped, "Forgive me." But it was too late for redemption. As Sir Daniel's life ebbed away, so too did the last vestiges of a corrupt era. In the aftermath, Sir Richard stood alone, the weight of justice heavy on his shoulders. The cost had been high, the path long and treacherous. Yet as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of hope, a new chapter began to unfold. Weeks later, the somber atmosphere of battle gave way to joy as Sir Richard and Joanna joined hands in marriage. The ceremony was a vibrant tapestry of noble and outlaw alike, a living testament to the bridges built and divisions healed. As they exchanged vows, their eyes shone with the promise of a brighter future. Together, Sir Richard and Joanna looked out over their war-torn land, hands clasped tightly. The scars of conflict were still visible, but so too were the first tender shoots of renewal. They made a solemn vow to use their position and wealth as instruments of positive change, determined to forge a legacy of justice and compassion that would honor those lost in their struggle. As the sun set on their wedding day, its golden rays seemed to herald the dawn of a new era, an era built on the foundations of love, honor, and the unwavering pursuit of what is right. The challenges ahead were many, but with hearts full of hope and hands joined in unity, Sir Richard and Joanna stood ready to face whatever the future might bring.
This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.